All right, guys, the moment of truth is here. We are talking about the Nintendo Switch 1 versus the Nintendo Switch 2 in a comparison of which had a better first calendar year. Now, this is a little bit tilted when it comes to the time in the Nintendo Switch 1's favor because the system launched back in March of 2017, and of course that calendar year would be to the end of 2017, so December 2017, whereas the Nintendo Switch 2 launched in June 2025, and we are now just in December as of me recording this video. But I still wanted to go over both of these years, 2017 versus 2025, the good, the bad, the games, the features, and what was put into each of these systems in a no-hold-barred comparison as someone who covered all the way leading up to the launch both of these systems heavily and have pretty much played all of the major games and titles that we're going to talk about to get a true comparison of which one was better. We are going to look at it game for game, blow for blow overall, and I'll give you guys my opinion on what all of this is. Now, I do want to go over just a couple ground rules. All full game titles that have been released will count. So even if that is a port like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, for example, or Pokken Tournament, those count for the Nintendo Switch 1, just like ports or updates of games for the Nintendo Switch 2, like Tears of the Kingdom or something like that. So keep that in mind. The games overall do count and are factored in, such as updates, NSO, all of that stuff. It's going to go into everything that comes into what games come out, the system itself, and what is going on. Because if you start trying to pick and choose which games will count and not, it becomes an unfair comparison overall. So it's going to be straight up the good and the bad when it comes down to it. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first calendar year games for the Nintendo Switch 1 when it comes to the major titles from Nintendo, and of course we'll get into third party and stuff like that. So Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, obviously a massive one, huge generational type of game. 1-2 Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, ARMS, Splatoon 2, Pokken Tournament, Fire Emblem Warriors, Super Mario Odyssey, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Snipper Clips, and we're going to count Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle. I'll have it on my third party list as well, but it's not really a first party game, but it's a licensed Mario into a Ubisoft game. So whatever on that one. So best third party, Doom 2016, Skyrim, Resident Evil Revelations, Rocket League, Rayman Legends, and LA Noire. Those were the best big or bigger third party games in the first year. And necessarily not great, but the indie scene was actually pretty good with Sonic Mania, Shovel Knight, SteamWorld Dig 2, Stardew Valley, Enter the Gungeon, and Fast RMX. So not bad when it comes to some of that, but definitely on the AA and AAA level for third-party games, it's absolutely lacking, like 100% on that one, because I was looking back and I was like, man, was it really that sparse? And yes, it really was that sparse, because I had to actually make a multitude of videos saying, hey, here's the reason why there's not as much third party when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 1. All right, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch 2 and the major titles, The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom updates when it comes to that. Plus, those were full releases as well on cartridge, so they do count in on this, although once again, I'm not going to factor it as a full new thing, but it still is factored in just like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in addition to Pokken Tournament. Those were Wii U games. All right, next up is Mario Kart World, which is an exclusive and new game when it comes to the Switch 2, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Hades 2, Pokemon Legends ZA, Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, Kirby Air Riders, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. Here are some of the smaller titles in the same lane as 1-2 Switch or Snipper Clips, Drag and Drive, Welcome Tour. With the Nintendo Switch 2 editions, we still have a couple more with Super Mario Party with the Jamboree TV, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus the Star-Crossed Worlds. That is the first party lineup when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, best third-party games, this is where the Nintendo Switch 2 has a massive, and I would say decisive blow against the Nintendo Switch 1, because you've got a lot of great stuff. Street Fighter 6, Split Fiction, Octopath Traveler 0, Hollow Knight Silksong, Trails in the Sky First Chapter, Final Fantasy Tactics, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D Remake, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 plus 4, Bravely Default HD Remaster, Cyberpunk 2077, Hogwarts Legacy, a bunch of Yakuza games, Rune Factory Guardians of Azuma, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Star Wars Outlaws, Persona 3 Reload, Wild Hearts S, and the Atelier Ryza trilogy. And I didn't even include all of the releases because there's more that maybe aren't the best but still there, like Daemon X Machina Titanic Scion, for example. So there is a lot when it comes to the third-party release. Now, this is something that some people might call foul when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2 updates of Nintendo Switch 1 games, but I'll say this, you've got to factor it in somehow because the upgrades to these games essentially make them way more playable, and in some cases completely better, like almost a whole new game. So I have to at least mention it. It's not factored in completely as a big new game like Donkey Kong Bonanza, but we have to mention it because it is a dramatic upgrade and actually makes the games way better or even actually playable for some people. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Listen, this game launched as a mess and still plays as a mess from a technical level with frame rate on the Nintendo Switch 1. It was so bad, I had to drop the game and I had to come back to it later to finish it. And I just went straight through. I didn't even explore and do all the leveling and do all the stuff that I usually do in a Pokemon game because the frame rate was so bad on the Nintendo Switch 1. On the Nintendo Switch 2, it runs and the resolution is decent. You can actually see the clarity when it comes to it. The draw distance, there's more Pokemon. It plays at 60 FPS. It moves in water areas. It becomes an actually playable game. And I would say jumps the points up by 10. It's like a 70 on Metacritic. I think that if it played like this from the beginning, it'd be like an 80 something or like at least the low 80s. So I do feel that is notable that we have to bring that up because it actually makes Pokemon Scarlet and Violet significantly more playable and almost feels like a new game at times. So that has to factor in, and I put some time into that when the updates were out when the Switch first came out. The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom plus Link's Awakening, both of these games are so uneven on the Nintendo Switch 1 when it comes to the frame rate. Echoes of Wisdom, I had to kind of just put down for a bit and come back to it just because it's just, you don't expect a chibi looking game, kind of side scrolling overhead view, you know, Link to the Past or whatever. You don't expect that to run at that frame rate. If you play, like let's say for example, the A Link Between Worlds on the 3DS, that runs at 60 FPS for that new age isometric or overhead 2D Zelda type of game. So you don't expect that on a more powerful system like the Nintendo Switch 1. So to get actual 60 FPS and looking so much better and makes it to where the frame rate isn't going all over the place, which does just affect the combat and affect the game. I have to mention that when it comes down to it. Also, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, specifically the Bowser's Fury section, is now running at a locked 60 FPS where there are a few frame rate dips on the Nintendo Switch 1, so that does make that better. And another major thing that we have to mention here is that if you play Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury portable mode on the Nintendo Switch 1, that's going to half the frame rate to 30 FPS, but if you're playing it on the Nintendo Switch 2 in portable mode, it's going to run at 60 FPS. So there was a massive issue overall with this game on the Nintendo Switch 1, especially in portable mode with the frame rate being cut in half, whereas you can get the full 1080p 60 FPS experience portable mode. And especially with this type of game, I think that is significant enough for it to say, okay, that's got to factor into what people can play and the quality of what is coming out, especially with the system in the first year. And also as a side note here, Splatoon 3 and Super Mario Odyssey, both of these games ran great on Nintendo Switch 1, but in Splatoon 3's case, you actually get the whole game at 60 FPS because the plaza area, the Inkopolis or whatever, that ran at 30 on the Switch 1. That's not where the main gameplay takes part, but it's still substantial to see that, okay, you can actually play the whole game at 60 FPS now, in addition to much better graphics as well. And then on top of that, Super Mario Odyssey, that game runs great on the Nintendo Switch 1, especially for how big it is and what it does, but it's not locked at 60 FPS, and the resolution portable mode is pretty low. On the Nintendo Switch 2 now, you're getting full 4K 60 FPS locked. You're getting 1080p 60 FPS, and it just makes that game a lot better when it comes to the locked, in addition to the clarity of the game as well. So Super Mario Odyssey and Splatoon 3 aren't as big of a factor as the other games when it comes to the updates, but they're still, I would say, somewhat of a factor. Now we have to get into some of the nitty gritty when it comes down to the systems itself, because games are one thing, but what about other things? And I think this is another decisive blow for the Nintendo Switch 1 at the hands of the Nintendo Switch 2, because Nintendo Switch 1, people don't remember, but the NSO was not ready. They delayed that for a year or so. There's no backwards compatibility, which we know that there's no backwards compatibility, but the Switch 2 has that. We've got to once again compare it straight up, good and the bad. GameCube NSO, new system added in at launch for the Nintendo Switch 2, and so far from what I've seen online and from my own personal experience, there's no Joy-Con drift. So the no Joy-Con drift so far at this point is definitely a good thing when it comes to the Nintendo Switch 2, whereas the Nintendo Switch 1, my Joy-Con drifted almost nearly instantly, so I had to send it in, it got fixed, and I never really had too many issues since then, but it was still an issue for many people when it comes to Joy-Con drift overall. And while this issue isn't as big of a deal for myself, because I use Discord for all of my voice communications, there was a pretty big, I would say, controversy when it comes to Nintendo using a voice chat app for voice chat instead of it through the system itself. And the Nintendo Switch 2 has built-in voice chat, in addition to built-in video chat, in addition to built-in watching other people's gameplay. So it takes the whole communication and interaction when it comes to voice chat to a whole new level. Obviously, the Nintendo Switch 1 doesn't even come close to matching. So when you factor in everything when it comes to Switch 1 versus the Nintendo Switch 2, it's pretty clear, and it's decisive victory for the Nintendo Switch 2 when it comes to the system and which had the better first year. Even if you exclude the other stuff like the Joy-Con, the NSO, stuff like that, I think that where the big, I would say, blow is the third-party support, especially the AA and AAA third-party support, being able to play stuff like Split Fiction, Street Fighter, Octopath Traveler, Hollow Knight, Silksong, Trails in the Sky, Final Fantasy Tactics, Dragon Quest, Tony Hawk, Bravely Default, Cyberpunk, Hogwarts Legacy. I even didn't put on here as like an indie game, but also a bigger game, No Man's Sky as well. And there's a number of indie games that I just kind of left out on the Switch 2 because they have enough AA and AAA games to just kind of dwarf what the Nintendo Switch 1 was doing. Now, and I can understand from the first party standpoint, if you're looking at that, I think that The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, the original release, in addition to Super Mario Odyssey and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, that is very compelling, along with ARMS and Splatoon. I get that, and I can kind of see a little bit of a, okay, maybe the Nintendo Switch 1 beats out the Switch 2 on first-party games because of those big two titles overall with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey. I think that's fair when it comes down to an assessment. If you're looking at my own personal gameplay and what I like overall, I do think that if you look at the whole breadth of stuff, so for me at least, Pokemon Legends ZA, that to me was really good. I like that game a lot. I put nearly 70 hours into that game, on top of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, which I still need to put more time into. I'm about 40 hours plus. Kirby Air Riders, Metroid Prime 4, Hades 2, which is a console exclusive right now, but it's going to come over to other platforms, but Nintendo helped out with publishing when it comes to the physical release on that. Mario Kart World, plus the Switch 2 updates with Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild being able to run at 60 FPS, and especially Tears of the Kingdom, it makes that game better. And I already love that game on the Nintendo Switch 1, but Tears of the Kingdom is significantly better on the Nintendo Switch 2 because there was dips every single time you pulled out Ultra Hand and all of that. So you have to factor in for people that are new playing the games as well. Not just people who already played them, but people new and what you can pick up. So when you start factoring everything from a first party and third party plus indie plus the system itself, the Nintendo Switch 2, in my opinion, absolutely crushes the Nintendo Switch 1. I don't think it's really close, and I think that the only reason why it might be somewhat close for some people is because of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Super Mario Odyssey, in addition to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 for some. But those two games, Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild, have such big clout and some of the best reviewed and best games of all time, and I can understand the nostalgia, and I can understand people saying, okay, those were just such massive games for that system in that first year, which is a huge impact. I agree 100%. But once again, looking at it without the rose tinted goggles, looking at it from a game for game basis, and games like Trails in the Sky first chapter to me are just as good, if not slightly better, than how Xenoblade Chronicles 2 launched, because that game was rough and I actually had to wait for updates because there was a lot of issues with that game. Whereas Trails in the Sky first chapter had a little issue, but ran significantly better and then got updated faster than Xenoblade Chronicles 2, to where now it's great on the Nintendo Switch 2 with Trails in the Sky first chapter. And that game is awesome because it does combine elements of Metaphor ReFantazio, of Persona, of Xenoblade itself, and of course their own unique DNA to create an incredible experience that I'm 30-40 plus hours into at this point. So for me, you look at the breadth of content available, you look at even the first party games, you kind of go blow for blow and match different games overall. The Nintendo Switch 2, to me at least, once again in my own gameplay, because I've played all of these games first party wise, I've played all of them overall, I do think that the Nintendo Switch 2 wins decisively on this one, just with the amount of content that it has. Once again, Switch 1, not bad. The beginning, we needed Switch 1 to get the Nintendo Switch 2. Heck, we needed the Wii U to get the Nintendo Switch 1. So there's a place with every single system and what it does, whether it's super successful or not. They learn and they get better, and they do different things and they try to improve. So it's supposed to be this way. It's not a knock on the Nintendo Switch 1. The Switch 1 is a great system and it did what it needed to do, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt that it had a great first year, especially compared to the Wii U. I think that the Nintendo Switch 1 blows the Wii U out of the water overall when it comes to the games and everything. But the Nintendo Switch 2 overall, if you're looking at everything, Switch 2 hands down was a much better in the first 6 months over the first 9 months of the Nintendo Switch 1. And we're not even counting what's happening early next year, which would be in the 9-month window. If we were comparing month for month overall, you have Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, in addition to Resident Evil Requiem, on top of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 8, all coming out. So that's another huge advantage when it comes to major third party and big games for the Nintendo Switch 2. And there's probably more stuff that I didn't even list that's coming out early 2026 for the Nintendo Switch 2. So those are my thoughts when it comes down to Switch 1 versus Switch 2 and which had the better year, with a game-to-game, feature-to-feature, and everything comparison. What do you guys think overall when it comes down to it? Let me know in the comment section below. All right, guys, that wraps it up for this video here. Thank you so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you're someone new, click that notification bell, and check out my other Nintendo Switch 2 RPG content and more right here on screen. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys for the next one. Peace.